Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Ajax Frameworks and Design Pattern Survey. My name is Diane Hinchcliffe. I'm editor-in-chief of the Web 2.0 Journal and Ajax World Magazine for Syscon Media. With the Ajax World Magazine just went print. You can find it at your local newsstands. Today, we're going to take kind of a topical tour across the different tools that are emerging for building Ajax applications and then emerging best practices for how we're going to design those applications. So I'm going to try not to make this boring at all. When we were doing our roundup of the year for all the different Ajax frameworks and utilities, we lost count at about 60 major frameworks and utilities. So we can't possibly go over them all today. So we've selected a few of the different kinds. There's both libraries and frameworks, and they're distinctly different. We're going to go over that as well. So we'll go through the frameworks first, kind of talking about the big design issues, the things that you're going to have to face to build effective Ajax experiences for your users. Then we'll take a tour of the design patterns, looking at some examples of real sites applying the current design patterns that we see used a lot out there on web applications. So I'm going to do an Ajax 101 just to kind of make sure everyone's level set and familiar with recent history and what's going on. As most of you probably know, Ajax was coined as a term in February 2005 by Jesse James Garrett, who spoke earlier today at the conference. However, it's a technique that's been around for a long time, primarily in Internet Explorer as far back as 1998, where they added a special ActiveX control to let JavaScript talk to background web servers. This is for the Outlook web client that they developed. And since then, a lot of folks have done some interesting things. And I run into Ajax framework vendors all the time who said, we were doing this in 2000 and 2001, but nobody was ready for this yet. No one was going to develop rich software in JavaScript. But Ajax really came into vogue when all the browsers caught up, right? We had Firefox, Mozilla, Safari, Opera, and IE could all essentially run Ajax. And of course, one of the issues we have as Ajax software designers is that not all browsers are the same. In fact, they have a variety of little differences, and that really creates some frustration for us as we try and create experiences that are smooth for all of our users. So the concept, though, is that the web page is turned into an application program just by virtue of its JavaScript. Scott Isaacs at Microsoft created DHTML, Dynamic HTML, which is using JavaScript to change the DOM. And we'll kind of talk about that in a minute. But he told me earlier this year, so they designed it just for form validation. They never intended it for creating sophisticated, rich applications that have real horsepower behind them, and which is what people are using and doing now with Ajax. So the concept is that the user interface is manipulated programmatically and in real time by JavaScript that fills around with the document object model. Well, I should go through that scenario in just a minute because that's an important thing to understand. And the web page isn't reloaded unless a new version or a new copy of the program has to be pulled out. The Ajax application has to be pulled down off the server. That has a lot of implications. We'll talk about how to feed Ajax applications as we go through this because they're cut off. Once you load an Ajax app, it can't talk back to the server unless it uses what we call this XML HTTP request object. So that means web design is turned into real web development. You have to have software engineering skills to develop an Ajax. Although some of the new declarative frameworks, which we'll talk about, kind of are taking that away and moving it back up to what it used to be. So the result is that we have pure browser software as rich as native PC applications, except much better. They're connected to the web, connected to the network. They can be collaborative, and they can start taking advantage of some of the neat things we're seeing in the Web 2.0 era. So the web itself becomes the real software platform, the preeminent platform, and Microsoft and all the big vendors, they get it. You know, operating systems are not going away, but the web is a place where our software is all moving, as well as our data. So this is from an article was Slashdotted, kind of that we wrote a while back, just talking about the major moving parts in Ajax. On the left, you have that document object model. The browser only looks at HTML that it loads once, briefly, when you reference a URL to load an Ajax application. That's all converted into programmatic objects called the document object model. And the blue part is what we create as Ajax application designers, the application code in JavaScript. And hopefully, we've built on top of an Ajax framework or library that does a lot of the infrastructure and plumbing, which is actually very difficult to do when you want it to work cross-browser. And you're trying to solve business problems or deliver functionality to your user, and you're not trying to twiddle around with the innards of the browser, you really want to use a framework. So you really have these three pieces where XML data moves back and forth. Then all out on the web, or maybe in your enterprise, if you're doing enterprise Ajax, you have a bunch of web services which are connected to databases or connected to application code, and you have information going back and forth, and your framework is hopefully doing this all in the background. You don't want to reload that page. And we have a variety of different types of web services that can talk to Ajax. Interestingly, the canonical web service, the web service that we defined, a standard that we defined around the year 2000, is not something that our browsers speak. They don't speak the SOAP protocol. And so that's one of the challenges we have as we discover web services don't work with web browsers without some help. And so the frameworks will take care of that too. Although emerging are these two new standards. One, REST, really isn't a standard. It's a style. It's just a way of using HTTP as a simple web service. The browser can speak it. And that really is getting mind share as far as how to feed your Ajax applications. The next piece is something you may have heard a little bit about today, but it's definitely something that a bleeding edge of the web community is talking about, JSON. That's the JavaScript object notation, much more compact than XML is. Not self-describing, but increasingly Ajax application developers, to get the performance for their sophisticated Ajax applications, are using JSON web services. And the browser does speak that as well. The other things you see below that are really enterprise class web services. We're not seeing too much of that out on the web. We are seeing a fair amount on the enterprise, and we'll talk briefly about some frameworks that address that. But that, in essence, bounds the Ajax design model. Here's a slightly more sophisticated view showing some of the events. Ajax is very event-driven and scheduling-driven because you can have these timers that periodically refresh and update both the DOM and check on requests that you've made to back-end web services. There's a lot of implications for using timers and managing outstanding requests, and it becomes quite a pain, and you have to have supporting tools to enable you. But kind of you see the overall HTML structure. You've got the classic HTML tag, and hopefully you're using XHTML, not HTML. It's deprecated generally when we're talking about Ajax, although things like the Dojo Toolkit breaks XHTML. You have the script area where you have all your JavaScript functions, all your code essentially, and then you have the web page HTML layout and the JavaScript event hooks. As the user is mousing around, clicking, and typing, all these events fire off and call your JavaScript code, and that's essentially your program. At the bottom, I've added this line that says Flash and things like Ajax local storage. We're going to talk about this repeatedly in this talk, but Ajax by itself does not let you do everything possible with rich user experiences, particularly around rich media like video and audio and capture. You can't do it. You have to use a combination of Flash and Ajax, and many of the emerging toolkits have good integration with both of them, which is important to get a full experience. So here are the properties that we get by developing Ajax applications. And I kind of have two similar views on the left that are converging. We've got, out in the web, we have this concept of mashups, using the web and all of its various web services. If you go to Preamble Web, they have 300+ open APIs that you can use instead of having to develop world-class web services yourself, you can just use what's out there on the web. And of course, with RSS, there are millions of web services containing information of every kind, and people are combining them all together and building software out of it. And so you have this mashup phenomenon using web services out on the web. Simultaneously, in the enterprise, we have this thing called SOA client, where people are saying, hey, Ajax is a great front end for my web services, my enterprise infrastructure, my service-oriented architecture. And what we get is zero footprint software. With Ajax, you'll never install anything again except maybe the Flash 9 plugin, right? That's about the extent of it. Other than that, you require admin rights. You don't do upgrade or patch ever again. Your software loads every time at the end of a URL. Uses web services, which is a best practice. The web used to be primarily visual, right? Just HTML. Now we have content. We have services that can be consumed by programs, specifically Ajax, to go out and get the information we want and display in far richer ways than we ever could with HTML. We have now dynamic GUIs. I think Jesse James Garrett calls Ajax the web on roller skates, right? Because you don't have the stop, start, stop, start. That really is very frustrating when you spend half your time waiting for the page to reload. Then you got to read everything again to find out what's changed since the last time, since you hit that submit button. With Ajax, that entire process goes away, and you have a much more highly intensive experience, far more productive. And so business applications and web applications are turning to this model, and it's as good as we have as our native software on our desktops now. This stuff can be made secure. Security is going to be an ongoing issue with online software of any kind when stuff is connected to a network that can go theoretically anywhere. But security is there, so that's one of the important aspects. And with a little work, Ajax applications can communicate with web services around the world. This is the cross-domain problem. We have a slide that really talks about what do you lose? Because Ajax doesn't just give you very compelling application experiences. It does take some things away that you have to make up for. And that's actually really important as you design your Ajax applications. And all this stuff is actually quite easy, and the tooling is getting better and better, although we're at the very beginning of the story. A lot of the big companies don't even have their Ajax stuff out yet. Even the really good frameworks haven't even hit 1.0. So it's an exciting time. There are no market leaders, and so if you're an Ajax framework developer, you can still win. And so it's an exciting time for a lot of people. So with pre-built widgets, frameworks, IDEs, and web services stacks that are just kind of out of the box, it's a pretty good time to be a developer of Web 2.0 applications. So let's go over this briefly, but the concept is we're now using the browser increasingly for composition. We're not doing integration on our servers. We're not doing it on our desktops. The browser is the last place we still have full control of. The IT departments are trying to reduce costs by locking down everything. And so it's just been a natural place for our software to move, where we still have a lot of control over things. Informal yet effective integration models. We talked about SOAP, big, heavyweight, older web services protocol. Everyone loves this new lightweight RSS. And REST protocols makes it very easy just to plug this stuff right into the browser, start feeding your Ajax application data. And we're blending JavaScript applications. A lot of our Ajax software, the code comes from other people like Google Maps. And we're going to look at some examples of that where just one line JavaScript include can pull in the entire Google Maps application, and then you add your Ajax code on top of that. Very exciting applications are coming out of that. So increasingly, we're creating blends of our code and other people's code, and it's all happening right in the browser. So one of the important things to talk about when you're kicking around the potential products that are out there and trying to figure out which one you should bet the company on, and you shouldn't right now. You should just be dipping your toe in the waters. We don't know what's going to happen out there. Things like Open Ajax are going to help, but trying to figure out what you should buy, because there's some important implications. But you should download it by, because open source is a big factor too. I should be clear. So libraries and frameworks. Libraries are primarily things that your JavaScript, your Ajax application will decide when the library is going to do something for you. So you'll call it and say, animate this, or make this request to this web server, and then tap me on the shoulder when it's done. But your program controls what's going on, the overall flow of things that happen. Whereas, in contrast, frameworks follow something called the Hollywood principle, as in, don't call us, we'll call you. And the framework kind of controls the agenda as far as how the overall event flow works, handling requests. And so you might have special pieces of functionality that have to run at a certain time, and you ask the framework, could you call this code at the right time, because it kind of understands the overall structure of the application. Dojo, which is a very popular Ajax framework, which we'll talk about, is a preeminent example of the framework, versus something like Scriptaculous or Prototype. Great libraries, but they're libraries. And so libraries tend not to impose overall structure. Frameworks are usually encompassing solutions that have these holes cut out for it, saying, all right, we're going to solve this kind of problem. We already know what we're going to need from you. Here's what you provide us, and we'll make sure everything runs like it's supposed to. And while it's not necessarily a make or break decision, although if you go with a framework, it controls what's going on. It's very hard to override it and say, I don't want you to do that. And so you kind of want to align your philosophy with your framework designer. Kind of understand why they built it, what were their design principles, and that's the way you like to design and build software, then that's good. If it isn't, you're going to fight your framework the whole time. So we're going to jump right into the tour of applications. This is going to be one of the biggies when it finally ships. We talk to Microsoft all the time, kind of keep track of what they're doing with this. Right now it's codenamed Atlas, and I can't for the life of me. They actually gave it a name, but it's a very typical generic Microsoft name. I think it's called the Microsoft Ajax framework, actually. But they have a lot of moving pieces inside this, and it's designed to be a complete solution. You won't need anything other than this. And so it's worth taking a brief tour of it. On the server side, and really good Ajax frameworks do a lot of the server-side work for you, because you don't want to be in the web services development business. If you're an Ajax programmer, you want to be focusing on the code that's in the browser. And so they give you a bunch of server extensions that run on your web server. It would typically be a Microsoft Web Server, with a bunch of bridges, both to a whole bunch of applications, so people can build Atlas bridges to CRM, ERP, and all the traditional big enterprise applications, so that your Ajax application can talk to all of the enterprise resources in your organization, and also to your service-oriented architecture. And given that service-oriented architectures tend to have many more web services protocols weaved inside them, like WS addressing, WS security, WS policy, that bridge excuses your Ajax application from having to worry about all that stuff. You just have to use their markup in the browser, and you get access to that. And so they give you quite a bit of infrastructure on the server side to make your life easy and give you good interoperability with the stuff on the back end. And that's what you want. Ajax applications need great sources of data. On the client side, and this is one of the big challenges, is Ajax libraries and frameworks tend to be fairly sizey. Before anything happens, you got to load the Ajax library or framework. And if you're blending multiple frameworks, you got to wait for all of them to load. You get the little status thing in the window changing URLs and names, all the while the user is waiting for this Ajax application to load. And there are some design patterns and strategies to mitigate that, the multi-stage load, so that the user can see something. But the Atlas framework's quite sizey. I think the last count I heard is about 350K of JavaScript, that it does quite a bit, as you can see. It has a complete component framework with a component model, event, and everything is all world-class. It's not the simple stuff that's in the browser. It's all very robust, very heavy-duty, industrial strength, with a complete class library, a scripting core, and then a browser compatibility layer, and they say their browser compatibility is excellent, not the so-called stuff that you see in a lot of the lighter weight frameworks, which are often very close, but there are so many different browser versions out there. If you look at the minor incremental releases and the patch levels of browsers, it is very hard to get an Ajax application to behave consistently, and this is one of the things they're advertising is going to be great for them. And then they give you a bunch of client application services, including a local store. One of the things you miss when you get browser software is you don't have places to keep your data locally. It's got to be on the server, and if your network is down or you don't have a connection, you don't get to your data. A lot of people have solved this in the open source Ajax world, but this Atlas also solves that for you as well, and also gives you access to other local services. And whether that's a really great idea is unclear. There's a lot of strengths to moving everything up to the network, but of course you can give up some autonomy. It's no longer a personal computer. This is all webware, right? So this is kind of a view of the Atlas architecture. It's going to be shipping soon, real soon now. A very good product. It works inside Visual Studio, has great debugging, and this is one of the things that we haven't had until recently is JavaScript debuggers worth a darn. Made Ajax software development and debugging very difficult. This and another one we'll look at has extremely good debugging. So good for software quality. The other one we see everyone using and really is well thought out and optimized for performance. So you can actually just very carefully, it has a requires model that allows you to very selectively include just the exact code that particular Ajax application needs and nothing extra. So it actually can load very quickly, despite the fact you can see the class library on the right there has quite a bit of stuff. So it's a true Ajax framework. It immediately, upon loading, hijacks all your event hooks, right? So it starts getting to work, and it kind of understands everything that's going on inside that Ajax application. And you don't mess with it. Like, don't override any events. You'll break it, right? But it's fantastic stuff, powerful and popular, and it goes far beyond visual eye candy, because you really have, and we'll go over the spectrum in a little bit, you have this broad spectrum of Ajax capabilities. Some people just want a little of animation and eye candy, and others are saying, no, I want to create the next Microsoft Excel all on the web. And there are many examples of Ajax spreadsheets, including Google Spreadsheets. So that stuff is happening, but they require very different capabilities. You don't need Dojo to do simple animation. That may be much better used for Scriptaculous or Prototype. But Dojo has a lot more, including local storage, really sophisticated animation, not the kind of stuff that you see in some of the other frameworks where they might shake or morph things, make them bigger and smaller, or change colors. We're talking about Bezier, curve, tracks, chained animation series, very, very powerful things that are smooth, and they work relatively well cross-browser, although you got to watch some of the browsers just have problems, like, for example, rendering serif fonts in animation. Hardly any of them do that very well. So you have widgets, the ability to have a control model similar to what we saw in the 90s when software development, at least on the GUI, got so much easier with things like Visual Basic, where you can just take all these bags of controls you can buy off the internet and create grids and all kinds of really powerful experiences with drag and drop. Well, with Dojo, that's possible. And in fact, the Open Ajax initiative, was just about every vendor in the Ajax world has signed on to, except for Microsoft, and they're thinking about it, creates a component model, a interoperable component model. So you can take widgets from one framework. They have a really great grid control, and you absolutely want that. You can use it with a different framework. So, and Dojo's widget model is what's used as the basis for that. Includes logging, language libraries to really expand it, and you can kind of see some of that. I encourage you, the documentation for Dojo is one of the things that's really lacking, but it's improving rapidly and has some great examples that come with it. Just looking at the Dojo examples that come with the download is worth some time. It has some great code, well documented, really good examples of what the very limits of Dojo can do. Built-in JSON support, accessibility, charting, drag and drop, and like as we said, it was the reference model for Open Ajax, and we expect to see some exciting things there. And all this, and it's only at version 0.4, which just recently came out, and had a lot of things like the charting. And I'm not even doing it justice. There is so much inside Dojo, and then you can optimize it. And if you're looking for a full-blown Ajax framework, it's one of the best out there, and it's a relatively safe bet. IBM is behind it 100%. It's getting very good Eclipse support, things like that. So it's good to look at dojotoolkit.org. So at probably the complete opposite end of an open source product, although it is have an open source like license, is Google's Web Toolkit. Not getting a lot of uptake out there, but Google has a very specific way that they develop software for their stack. They have an industrial strength web stack where you might look at something even very impressive like Java as being like the size of a house and like a traditional residence. The Google stack is like an iron skyscraper 50 stories tall. It's built to scale up to the planet, serve millions of users. And so when they wanted to develop things like Google Maps and Gmail, they said, well, all right, we have to make this easy, but we don't have a lot of JavaScript programmers. And I actually had a client one time this year. We sat down and looked at their call center application, and it was 20,000 lines of JavaScript. And the guys were like, this is like writing machine language. This stuff is so low level, and you have to manage every little tiny property in the DOM. And it's brutal, and it's not a very productive way to develop software. Great, rich experiences. And Google understood that, and they said, we're not going to retrain all of our guys. We have armies of the world's best Java programmers. What we're going to do is let them write in Java, and then they compile that to JavaScript. And so what they do is they have used the Eclipse IDE as the place where they provide all their provide the GWT library. That's where you actually do the development, and it's got great support for autocomplete. And then it's got the compiler, compiles to JavaScript. And so this picture kind of shows the major pieces here. We have, on the left, they've taken the Java runtime library and they've replicated it. There's an include, which I have somewhere here on this diagram. It's about 100K. It loads the GWT runtime. It's the mandatory include that you have to have. It's about 100K, and it includes all of basically java.lang and about half of java.util. And so what you do is they have a bunch of panels and widgets and everything they're already created. You go into Eclipse, you program purely everything in Java, like you're a traditional Java developer, and you have to stick with what they have in their runtime library that downloads in the browser. And so you write it once, and it generates code that runs in every browser. The browser compatibility is quite good, although I don't think anyone has it perfect. You write it. You then you write your backend servlet. And this is my major knock on this framework, is that it doesn't support anything but a special flavor of their RPC back to the server. So you have to run it in a servlet engine. You have to run their servlet on the server side. But if you do that, what they give you is fantastic Visual Basic style, very easy to develop Ajax applications using the skills that you already have, instead of having a bunch of people learn how to be really great JavaScript programmers, which is hard. JavaScript is, browsers like we talked about are not designed for this. You hit a button, and it generates all the Ajax for you, and you're done. And the problem is that although they do have a backdoor so that you can add other libraries and frameworks, that's the real limitation. It's kind of an enclosed, sealed world. But it's an interesting choice, and it works very well, and some interesting applications have been developed with it. And you'll find that Google's Ajax applications tend to all have the GWT feel, if you look at Gmail and Google Maps. A completely different angle on Ajax is JackBe. I think we have John Krupe from their company here. Really kind of at the extreme edge of being able to create Ajax, business class Ajax applications very, very quickly. They have two products, which you can kind of see in the lower left. They have the NQ framework, which is a very lightweight yet very capable Ajax framework, and then they have a browser-based end-user IDE. They can have just regular folks can drag and drop controls, connect to web services in the enterprise that are registered, and they provide, like similar to what Microsoft does, a whole complete backend that has Comet, which I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Comet. It's a play on the word Ajax. It's basically server-side push, fantastic for certain types of applications like real-time stock quoting is a good example. And what they give you is, we see the two big trends: end-user mashups, allowing people just to take the widgets and web services and glue together the applications that they want on demand, all with Ajax, all end-user drag and drop. And so it's probably among the more easy ways to develop Ajax applications, except you won't have as much control as a programmer. But very interesting. So we call this situational software. We had a few talks about this at the conference already. Very interesting trend that we're seeing in the enterprise. So this is another one. We're seeing, like with a lot of these, a whole web stack, right? Entire solutions that have everything you need for the rich user experience in the front end and everything you need on the server side. The one that's really getting mindshare because of its very powerful capabilities is Ruby on Rails. And that's not to knock. I've talked about Ruby on Rails at this conference a few times already, and the PHP folks say, but us too, and absolutely. We're seeing that the economics of server-side software development and just web application development are just dropping dramatically with things like Ruby on Rails. And IBM actually did a study saying, all right, we're going to see, there's a lot of hype. Let's get to the bottom of this. Can you develop Ajax applications with the front end and back end, with database support, do the whole thing? Really, can you do it 10 times more efficiently, 10 times easier using Ruby on Rails? And so they looked at it, and they said, yeah, for actual web application development, not for other types of applications, but for web apps, Ruby on Rails, which has built-in Ajax framework, scriptaculars, and prototypes, so that's what we have on the left there, is actually 10 times more productive at least. If you get good at it, you can actually squeeze out far more productivity. Amazing. For database-driven applications, it's probably the most effective complete solution for Ajax-powered software development. I think the O'Reilly folks said that if you look on the basis of just the books published, it is the most popular stack this year for web application development. And most of the startups, the Web 2.0, so-called Web 2.0 startups that have started since January, have selected the Ruby on Rails stack with scriptaculars and prototype, which are very blendable. You can bring in other frameworks and libraries if you want to, so it's very inclusive. A fantastic story, and I urge you, since if you were working for a startup or even a traditional company, and your competition is cutting the cost of development this much, and I can vouch for it. We've seen a lot of folks do amazing things with this web stack. Cannot be ignored. And so while it's not a fit for everyone, and there are some issues you should be aware of, it is probably one of the most exciting stories in web app development going on right now. So when we talk about trying to make sure that we're not doing we're working smart. We're making sure we're using tools and libraries that do solve all the problems that have already been solved. We should be focusing on running software to solve the problems that haven't been solved yet. And so we have this full spectrum of approaches here that goes from the very top, where you have these very, very comprehensive all-or-nothing frameworks. This is GWT, to some extent Microsoft Atlas. They're very large, and they form complete extensible platforms. And you have to spend time on training and really learning them and understanding and appreciate them to be able to extract your investment and commitment to them. At the bottom, and this is things like Scriptaculous, through in Zapatec, there are just so many. That's just kind of a placeholder for the dozens of Ajax widget libraries that are out there. They're very pick and choose. They're very we'll get along with whatever you want to pick. We jumped on the Open Ajax bandwagon. We're very loosely joined. We love the whole widgetry concept, so that you can build applications out of a bunch of little pieces, your favorite little parts, you pick and choose from what you like across the different libraries. It's a really important spectrum to understand what you're doing, because it's hard to mix stuff from the top with the stuff from the bottom of that spectrum. And so you should be well aware of that as you're deciding on the ingredients to your Ajax strategy. And the fact is, Ajax is just part of the rich internet application story. It's not a complete solution. We talked about you can't do video and audio or capture without plugins. of some kind. Flash is, of course, the preeminent one, but there are new ones emerging, which we'll talk about in a minute. What's nice, though, is that, for example, you can write your application once, not worry about the browser compatibility issues at all, and you also get on top of mobile devices. I don't know how many of you have a Sony PSP, but it has a Flash player built right in. If you're developing applications that target that, you automatically get opted in and carried along for the ride for every mobile platform that supports the Flash plugin or any of the other plugins that are coming. That's something to think about carefully when you're thinking about the audience for your application, because there's a lot more mobile devices than there are web browsers. There's only 170 million IP addresses worldwide. There are over 1 billion mobile devices. Some people think up to 2 billion mobile devices. So that's not something to take lightly, and you get less testing and higher-level tools. The whole declarative model for software development, for GUIs in particular, is the way to go, and we kind of lost some of that with Ajax. Lots and lots of pros and cons. And I wrote an article for ZDNet that this diagram's a part of, and because of time, we're probably not going to go over that, but really understanding each one of those points is really, really critical. You can't go one way without losing something, and vice versa. So understanding your trade-offs there is absolutely essential when you say, all right, my Ajax strategy is going to have my favorite framework, a couple libraries. I'm going to do Flash in the following way, using the following development tools. And I want all this stuff to fit together, and you have to do all that due diligence to make that happen. It sounds like a lot of work. It's not that bad, but you do have to carefully make your decisions, because it's like all good software architecture, avoiding points of irreversibility, where you can't go back without abandoning a lot of code that you've developed. So options out there include, and actually we're going to take just a real quick dive into OpenLaslo, but you can augment Ajax with Flex 2, and a stunningly powerful rich internet application platform. Very cookie-cutter looking, but what you get is absolutely fantastic, and it will form the basis of Adobe's new Apollo platform, which is, if you've been following that, it's going to be a major story next year. OpenLaslo, been around for a long time, but they've now they've open sourced it. Everything about it is free, including the server-side pieces, and you're about to see here in a second, you can declaratively write Flash applications or target Ajax, and what they do for you, the work they do for you, is stunning. And Microsoft's big play is going to be Windows Presentation Foundation everywhere. This is going to be a cross-browser plugin. They swear that it's going to work great in Safari, Opera, and Firefox. All indications are that's true, and it has 3D graphics support. So that's what the last piece that we're really missing in rich internet applications is accelerated 3D animation. We'll get that with Windows Presentation Foundation everywhere. And so just betting purely on Flash may not be smart, depending on if you're trying to build, for example, the next Second Life clone. So let's very briefly take a look at what OpenLaslo is doing. So openlaslo.org is where you can download their SDK. Laslo is a declarative language, which means you say how the application is going to look and how it's going to behave. All right, how it's going to look and behave, instead of going through and spending all of the time writing all the procedural code. So they have this demonstrator called Project Legals, which we're going to jump into once I find the right link here. And they have moved everything around since we last did this demo. Okay, so this is a mashup application written in Laslo that goes out to Flickr and will pull up pictures based on a tag. And so they've written the application a single time in Laslo. You'll have a Flash version of it, which runs in a Flash plugin that takes over the page. With one option, you can say, I don't want you to generate Flash code for me. I don't want that Swift. I want DHTML. I want an Ajax application. And we're going to compare the two. So let's look at the Flash application first, because we all kind of know what Flash is capable of. Very impressive immersive graphics. And so you saw the whole morphing effect and then the animation. And now you're seeing pictures pull through because they defaulted this tag to festive. And so I can type in like Christmas up here as well. It's using web services. Notice that the application hasn't reloaded. The same application code is running. It actually went out via Flickr's web services and pulled down these latest pictures here. And I can do things like dragging selection boxes and selecting a range of pictures. And you see we have all the different transparency effects. I can click on the pictures and drag, and they all move over, and I have this smooth drag and drop, and I can put them in the selector down here. And they all fade in, right? So this is all the stuff we would expect with Flash. Yeah, of course, Flash can do these very amazing interactive graphical experiences. And they even give you a little slider control to increase the size of the applications. Very, very smooth animation. I would notice, let me look at the speed. This doesn't always work if you have a slow connection, but I'll type in Ajax. Look at the speed at which the pictures load here on the Flash one, and we'll compare that with the HTML. All right, so we're now going to look at the exact same application written in Laszlo, but then now targeted for Ajax to see what's different. And if you actually look at the source code, it's very tiny for this application. It's quite simple. All right, so we are now in the Ajax application. Look for the same effects. We just see the same morphing effect, which we do. All right, that was Ajax. Page didn't reload. It actually changed there. I don't know if you noticed, but the pictures loaded a lot faster. That's one of the big advantages of running code in the browser is the picture pipelining that they've spent years perfecting in the browser allows you to open up and really open up a lot of connections and suck those pictures down faster, because Flash is limited to one, really. I get the same exact drag box, the same code that I wrote it for the other one. Very nice and smooth. I get the same picture transparencies, and then if I click on one of these pictures and drag, am I going to get the same functionality? A little bit imperceptibly slower, but you see we get the same effect here, right? And it actually fades in so fast at the bottom you don't even notice it, but the same code base. So very interesting to see what we're doing as far as rich internet applications. Here you can seamlessly target Flash or Ajax, same code, very declaratively. And let's try the picture scrolling here too. Not quite as smooth, but very, very close. We get the same sort of, and it's rewriting programmatically, rewriting using JavaScript to rewrite all that, all the DOM code, resizing each one of those images and everything by manipulating the attributes of the document object model. So very interesting. So this is an important, very important tool in your toolkit if you're developing certain types of applications and you have access to web services. We didn't reload that page once, and so you can target multiple platforms with a single piece of code. Good stuff. Adobe's Flex 2 doesn't allow Ajax targeting, but rumor is that they will. So key design constraints on Ajax, what you really need to know, because you're going to lose some stuff if you don't take care. One is cross-domain communication. A lot of people think you can load in Ajax code into the browser and it can just talk to any web service in the world. Not true. Browser keeps track of what code came from where. It only lets the code that came from a given server talk back to that server. That's for security reasons. The security sandbox has been there for a long time. There's a reason for it, a good reason. And there are many, many ways to get around it. You can look up dozens of hacks to make that possible, from everything using Flash, hidden Flash, 1 pixel size Flash controls to rewriting the JavaScript using the DOM, to all sorts of things. So there are ways, they're not cross-browser. So you have to do some work to make Ajax do the things you really can do. A more important one, however, and this is very important if you're developing a broad consumer app or an application in the enterprise that is supposed to be used by relatively unskilled workers, this is the loss of GUI conventions. We've built up for the last 20 years kind of the Windows model of how we interact with our computers. Everyone expects to see their software with menus and buttons in certain locations and be able to resize windows. Ajax loses all of that. Not only do we not have the conventions of the browser anymore, because you can do virtually anything you can dream up in Ajax, you can implement. And so if you guys were here for the Yahoo user interface library, they've done an enormous job trying to bring that back, but by changing the flavor. And I've actually asked Microsoft, said here's a great chance to move user interfaces a whole leap forward. People are expecting a break with the past here, and they said, no, we're going to make it look like Windows. Because people know it. And so when you develop these applications, people know how to interact with it. But a lot of people don't even know what to click on anymore when they're faced with certain types of Ajax applications. And so just handing these tools to a bunch of developers who are going to try and be very creative and innovative, and we want them to do that, if they don't have any guidelines, since they can do anything they want, they will. And so it's important to try and get that back. A little bit more importantly is breaking the browser model. The back button doesn't work anymore. It kills your Ajax program, right? You have to do some work to trap it and go, hey, do you know that if you click on that, by clicking on that, you're about to leave the program and all the work you're done is about to be lost if you haven't sent it through your web services? So a lot of the frameworks now handle that. Dojo has back button support, which is actually quite good, very sophisticated. They actually let you support it, the forward and the back button. So let's say you've got a screen that has a bunch of different tabs or views. You can use forward there, and it will trap that and allow you to control your user interface. Brings back some of the controls that people are instinctively using up there in the left-hand corner of their browser. You can actually preserve that. Because the history, same problem. In fact, the fundamental unit of thought on the web is the hyperlink. Everything is supposed to be addressable with the URL, and that's how you get to it. And that's how search engines find it. We lose the link concept because, for example, one business Ajax application I saw, the user will spend hours in it before they'll ever move away from it. And they'll have looked after screen after screen after screen, tabbed through all sorts of things, pop-ups and dialog boxes. They've been hanging on one URL the whole time. And the great power of the web is that you can be on a given view of something inside Google News, type in some search words, and all the stories come out, and you can mail that link, and it will reproduce those results. That information is addressable and indexable. So a search engine can then pull that back up. If it ever finds that link, it will pull the link up, index all that content. We lose that with Ajax applications, and search is one of the most important parts of the web. That's why the web works so much better for us than it does typically in our organizations, because everything is findable. Discoverability is there. With a couple words, you can find anything out of the 11 billion pages on the web. You can type it in and get that. Ajax breaks that. It also breaks analytics and a bunch of other stuff. And so your marketing department comes to you and go, I don't know what people are doing anymore. I don't even know what our page views are. No one's finding it via search engines. And so, it depends on if your content is designed for that. Some things, it don't need that, but you have to be very careful and understand that that's one of the things you've given up with Ajax unless you work hard to preserve it. Like Dojo gives you the ability to rewrite the URL without reloading the page and gives you a way to get back to that particular view. So let's say someone has a tab to control, and they go down to screen 4, and then they scroll down to some content. Dojo gives you a way of making that addressable again and findable. And so that can be very important depending on your application. So the good news is, a lot of people accuse me when I give these talks saying, you're saying it's really hard and there's a lot of dangers to it. That's not true. It's just that with powerful tools come more responsibility. And the good news, all of these can be fixed today by selecting the right tools and focusing on these issues and understanding them and applying the right concepts. So this gives us kind of a full context. So when we kind of talk about web ecosystems that the web has become, because everything's all getting wired together with web services, and you have these RSS feeds that are all connected in these big circular systems, like nutrients circulating in the rainforest. And so we really have three big pieces. You have the user experience way out on the left there. That's HTML, rich internet applications, mobiles, and then there's all this hybrid stuff. When we do a lot of our Web 2.0 talks, we bring this big stack of devices that most of you would never recognize, but they're all web connected. A lot of them have flash capabilities. The web is kind of moving into every little corner of every little device, and your applications will be used from devices you never expect. And if you're not sure, check your server logs for the types of browsers you're getting hit with these days. It's quite surprising. On the far right side, we have our enterprises. We're increasingly, everyone's saying, all right, everything's got to move to the web. All of our products are on services and data, and we have to open up everything with APIs, which then people will connect to their Ajax applications. And then the web in the middle, where everything's talking increasingly with these rich internet applications talking to web services, which are becoming a very important way of exposing services. So that kind of wraps up. That's kind of the instead of taking a deep dive into the specifics of JavaScript, you kind of get an understanding of the big design issues, the big moving parts, things you have to think about as you design Ajax, good Ajax software. But that's really more on the product side, on frameworks, utilities, libraries, and things like that. Now we're going to talk briefly about design patterns. So what are people doing? What are the concepts that people are coming up with, and when they develop Ajax applications? What are the recurring problems and solutions? And so design patterns are, the phrase is meant to capture that. It's a standard solution to a common recurring problem. And what people noticed is, as someone encounters a problem in the software development industry, usually there's a couple of recurring solutions people come up with time and time again to the same problem. And they kind of capture those and say, hey, this is a pattern. I'm seeing this recurring. Let's capture this so that new folks, people who are trying to get at this and start doing it, that they understand what the best design patterns are, what the best practices are. So we're actually going to take a tour of some of the leading Ajax design patterns. There's an Ajax patterns book now based on all of these. These are all open sourced, by the way. So these aren't owned by anybody, which is why we present them. And so instead of being someone's proprietary made-up design patterns, these are extracted from the industry, and everyone owns them. And you can go onto the ajaxpatterns.org wiki and change them all yourself and add them. And a lot of people do. So these are the basic design patterns frequently found in your garden variety Ajax applications. The majority of Ajax apps use these patterns because they capture the very essence of what Ajax apps do. They're more reference models than true design patterns in that if you understand the way that they're originally design patterns were articulated, you have a balance of forces, and you're supposed to be able to capture them and describe them as a solution to a problem in a situated context. This is not that formal. This is not computer science. This is more software development. So there are 66 common Ajax design patterns in this view of things, kind of organized loosely into 14 groups. I'm not going to go over every single one of them. I'm going to touch on the important ones and show examples of them. Many of you will be familiar with them, but some of them you won't be, and they are interesting. And they address the core issues in the design of Ajax software, and partially addresses the problem of the loss of GUI conventions. I'm more and more being swayed by the Yahoo user interface library. They're doing great work there, and you'll see a lot of them here. So the first three major categories are display manipulation, which encompasses display morphing and page rearrangement. It's amazing when you use the DOM programmatically and you pull out something in the DOM tree and put it out somewhere else. Right as you do that, the page changes. The browser is amazingly efficient at taking changes to the DOM and instantly rendering them. And so as a JavaScript program interacts with the DOM, the user sees those changes as they happen, and it can have a stunning effect. And so here's a little example from the Yahoo user interface library, just showing behind the event handlers for each one of these little buttons is just a little bit of code that adds things to the DOM or changes their properties so that you can see things fly in. And so there's just little bits of code that are manipulating that DOM. Remember on that original diagram way on the left? And the browser it sweats every one of those changes and tries to make sure that faithfully reproduced as the program, the little bit of JavaScript runs, it updates all of that. And so that's just a common pattern. The Yahoo user interface container tutorials, fantastic. Some of the best documentation I've seen out there, definitely worth talking about. Web remoting is important to talk about for a couple of reasons, because most people think Ajax is all about talking to web services. Not necessarily true. In fact, screen scraping is back. A lot of people say, I don't have time or I don't have the ability to write a web service. They pull in HTML and they scrape out the content that they're looking for. And I see a lot of people doing that. They don't need to stand up a web service to do Ajax. You can pull any HTML source from anywhere on the web and use substrings. Find the information you're looking for and pull it out of there. Not great user interface design, web services or API design. It works, though, and this is kind of what we call guerrilla Ajax, for people to get in there and make this stuff work. XML HTTP request is the object that you're supposed to do it efficiently, but there's a couple of dirty secrets that you need to know about. One is multi-part file upload does not work with XML HTTP request. So if you're trying to replicate the web form where they upload a bunch of attachments or create a webmail client, surprise, can't do it with Ajax. So you have to use something called an iframe, which is kind of how we did Ajax way back in the day. It's not as flexible, and you can't do things with an iframes quite as much in the background, although you can simulate it. And so what's nice, the Dojo handles this for you automatically. It can figure all this out. Dojo is actually smart enough to look at a web form and figure out the API call and the files that have to be uploaded and take care of it for you. So the good news is you really don't have to worry about it if you're using a good framework. The bad news is you absolutely have to worry about it if you're trying to write a sophisticated web application. You're not using a big, robust library. You're going to find you're back doing the plumbing again, which is not what you want to be doing. And then HTTP streaming, keeping information flowing in from the browser. This is great for all the new applications, which are very interactive, and they want to efficiently push a lot of information continuously to the client. They keep their connections open. They let data travel across those open connections. And then at the bottom, dynamic behavior, which is kind of lead into the next visual on the next page here, is There's two ways to make things happen in an Ajax application. One is the user does something, and so Ajax applications are reactive for this first piece. They sit there and do nothing until somebody clicks something, right? Or a web service request in the background finishes, and then the browser will tap your code on the shoulder. But in either case, that's a reactive model. The Ajax application is passive. No JavaScript runs unless someone moves a mouse or types or does something in the user interface or something on the web server happens. In the second one, Ajax applications can be proactive. They can periodically wake up and do something for you. And so that has a lot of implications because timers in Ajax, in most browsers, are not very good. One of the things people find out early on is that as soon as you create about 4 or 5 timers, you're done. And running at the same time. And so you tend to want to be very efficient, create a small number of timers that do a lot of different things, that check in on a lot of your different Ajax JavaScript code. And so the big problem is when the users, when you've decided, especially the mouse over is the worst offender, right? It's just tons of events, and a lot of people early on, like, well, I want a lot of interactivity and a lot of eye candy. As they scroll over, I want to be calling the web server, getting information back. And not only does that can bring your web server to its knees with a single Ajax application issuing hundreds of requests to the web server, the application gets very jerky. The browser is not an operating system, and it's not even a very highly threaded environment. They've done some optimizations in the background, but remember, JavaScript was designed for form validation. The HTML was designed for form validation. And so while they continue to beef it up, timers and using lots of them is a real challenge. And so getting back to the previous screen, though, reactivity and JavaScript timers are the two ways that Ajax application behavior is triggered. That's how it all starts. A lot of different ways, styles of web services you need to be aware of to feed your Ajax application. REST web services, that's the best practice. REST was invented by Roy Fielding, the guy who created HTTP, which is the fundamental protocol of the web. So he probably knows what he's doing because it's gotten so big, as you may have noticed. Exposes your web services according to RESTful principles. He wrote a PhD dissertation after he invented the HTTP. It's more of a style, but it's a very effective, highly scalable, super easy to consume web services protocol, primarily based on XML, but it can use other state models. The next one is RPC. RPC is not a very web-friendly. It's kind of a more traditional web services model. You'll see that with things like the GWT. It shows that for performance reasons. It's a non-textual, primarily, way of communicating with your web services. You won't use it a whole lot, but it's on the list here because you will find RPC web services, especially if you have J2EE environments. HTML response. This is kind of along the lines of the HTML scraping, but a lot of the times, and Ruby on Rails is particularly good at this, is saying, don't send me just the data, send me the data and the way it's supposed to be presented in the Ajax application. And you can use a great little function in JavaScript called inner HTML and just whop that right in there. Inner HTML is one of the maybe not necessarily the cleanest way, but it is a super effective way of updating the DOM. And we'll go over all of these. I'll highlight a few. Semantic response is important, very efficient. Sometimes people just use plain text. Obviously, XML messages will pass over the web services, but JSON is one I will highlight. If you haven't heard of it, you need to understand it a little bit better because you'll increasingly see them. I think Yahoo and eBay both just upgraded all of their APIs so that they support JSON. It's much more efficient, but less self-describing. And of course, RSS. That's the #1 web service out there, hands down. There are millions of RSS feeds hanging off of blogs and wikis and everything else you can think of. And it's probably, when you're developing an Ajax application that uses external sources of data, you're likely to see it. And then there's SOAP at the bottom. And I don't think that this is going to be a player for a long, other than some edge case situations for enterprise software development. Some great patterns around performance optimization, making Ajax fast. I won't go into all of these because we still have some content to go and we're running out of time. Some are good. One is guesstimate. Instead of grabbing real data from the server, make a guesstimate that's good enough for most users' needs. This is good if you have millions of users, like a lot of the big sites do, and calling every call that you make on using your timer, saying, "Give me how many messages, unread messages I have." If you have 1 million people doing that, that's non-trivial. So you want to save those calls, and actually you want to lump them together. I think that might be down in the list here too. But the guesstimate's one good way of doing that. Explicit submissions, instead of submitting upon each JavaScript event, require the user to explicitly request it. And so they can do a bunch of work. When they got a batch ready, they can send it in, and instead of having this high-intensity conversation with your server, it's much more sensible and gives the user more control. They kind of know what has happened, whether data has made it all the way to the server or not, whether the save, in other words, worked. And then predictive fetch. When we talk about the web being on roller skates and the really cool things with Ajax, Google Maps kind of really highlighted what was possible, the neat things about anticipating what users are going to need. So let's take a quick look at that. I am sure everyone is familiar with Google Maps. But it's worth zooming in. Let's go to my zip code, which is right in downtown Washington, D.C. And what's neat is, no matter how much I scroll, the tiles are there. We don't have these, we hardly ever, unless you go really fast. Do you see right there? And there's actually code in there to watch which direction you're scrolling, and it's talking to the web service in the background going, give me map tiles, give me map tiles. I think he's going to look over there. And so that you can go very quickly, and it just seems like you have this endless map, when in fact you don't. You have JavaScript and a timer in the background going, give me images so I can, in case the user scrolls. He may never scroll, but I'm going to have the tiles around it. And so you can very intelligently, and of course, this doesn't create an increased load on your server, because you're going to request data that you may not need. However, it creates a better user experience. And so while you should look at server efficiency, user experience is just as important too. And so that Ajax lets you do very neat things like that. So the predictive fetch is an interesting design pattern. So this takes us to performance and throttling. We talked about a lot of this. One of the problems you'll have is, especially as you design very rich Ajax applications, is the fact that you'll call a lot of web services in the background through your proxy. In general, the code can't talk to all the servers in your organization or all the servers on the web. It has to go through the local web server, which will then do it for you. And so I have on this diagram a circle here called the data cache, and it's really good. If you know that if the user navigates away from a view, don't throw away the data if you think they're going to go back to that view and you're just going to get it from the server again. And if you know that data is not going to be, will not have expired, it makes sense to have an array having the last 20 requests or the last 20 views. And instead of going back out there and getting the data again and hammering that web server, especially with large-scale Ajax applications, you can just do a few things to make your server utilization and your response time much better. Because, of course, the Ajax app will perform much better every time. It doesn't have to go out over the network to get data that you'd already retrieved the last time. And the good Ajax application frameworks and libraries will help you manage your data cache locally. So you get that kind of effect. Three more categories. Extensions, remixing and mashing. We kind of talked about the cross-domain proxy. You have to have one. They don't come with web servers except for Apache. And then richer plugins, very important to augment your Ajax application if you're doing rich media. The Flash plugin allows you to control the cameras and the microphone on the computer, and so you can develop very two-way Web 2.0 participatory applications using that plugin. The Ajax will never be able to do by itself, at least not until we go through another complete browser generation. Code generation or reuse, some good examples. Yeah, the Ajax stub is probably the most important one. This is Dojo's IO bind function, which is probably the neatest part of Dojo, if you ask me. It basically makes the act of calling a web service of any flavor. It'll read your form tags for you. It'll do your multi-part upload. It'll know exactly how to do that with iframes or XML HTTP request. In fact, when we do our Ajax boot camps, it's amazing that the same code to do the real Ajax backend calls and manage the callback that comes through and everything is 50, 60, 70 lines of code. It's one line of code with Dojo IO bind. And it abstracts all the little gory details of browser differences and everything for you. Content widgets. We won't go into widgets too much because most of you will be familiar with them, especially if you sat through the last session. There's things like drill downs, micro content, pop-up support. I actually put in one neat thing that Netflix does. They're a great long-tail web application. They have also a pretty good example of an Ajax pop-up. And so this is their now available. And as I hover over one of these, you see a nice, very nice pop-up materialize. Good production values and everything. That it assumes because you drug over the picture that you want additional information. The act of clicking is something the user has to do, and they're not sure if the screen's going to go away or what's going to happen. So you notice that this pop-up comes as you drag over these different these views. And of course, as a web server, it's going to get the information to populate that pop-up. So the nice thing is that users have this seamless experience. They know they're not about to lose their visual context. They're not going to speculatively click. So it's just a very easy, enjoyable experience, and they can get a lot of additional information through which to make their decisions without having to click on anything. So just one of my favorite user interface design patterns. Then the whole form widgets thing, it's worth looking at a couple of examples here. One is live search. A good example of this is Google Suggest has this. Interactively, as a user refines their search query, continuously show the current results. So let's pop out to Google Suggest. It's actually their main search engine, but it's been Ajax powered. And so I can type in Ajax design patterns. Let's not type too much here. But you can see that it has used Ajax to fetch information about how many results. It's under Ajax Diner. There's 10,900 results. And so literally, as you're typing that, JavaScript handler is issuing requests to the backend going, search for Ajax D. Tell me how many results are under those top requests. So it's kind of neat. It's a good interactive search. It's a great way for users to get instant feedback as they type about information that you have on the backend server. So good pattern there. Data grids. The Ajax is good for applications that previously would have had these giant HTML tables, and as most of you know, the table doesn't finish rendering until all of it's loaded. What if you have 200,000 rows in that table? Browsers will attempt to render it, and they may crash or freeze. But with Ajax-powered grids, you're only going to show what's visible on that screen. The JavaScript can talk to the server and pull down just the information that it needs. So one of the best examples is the Nitobe grid done by Andre Charland. Used to be called eBusiness Apps. They probably have the most industrial strength grid currently available for Ajax. That's all they do, by the way. They just have a product. This is a really, really great grid. So this is the Ajax grid here. You can see I've got the highlighting. I've got the resizable columns. I don't think I have the reorderable columns. But they have thousands and thousands of rows here. So I'm going to take the thumb, and I'm going to move it all the way to the bottom. And what it is that the page did not reload, but the JavaScript went to the server, pulled in more names, and showed it to me, and then readjusted the thumb. So I can go down more, and it goes down and pulls more data off the server, so that you can create new types of applications holding much more data than you ever could have if you had a traditional static web page. And so this is primarily for things like financial applications or other things which have to give you instant, reliable, fast access to mountains of data without your web server or your browser crashing. So just a good example of what you can do with Ajax grids that far exceed what HTML forms were capable of, HTML tables, I should say. At the bottom, page architecture. There's different ways you can organize Ajax applications: drag and drop, sprite, status area, and virtual workspace. Page flakes is my favorite Ajax start page. There's many like NetVibes and ProtoPage. Live.com, which is Microsoft's big web platform play, is very similar to this. I have to answer a few questions, so it'll let me do my thing. So this is an Ajax start page, and allows you. It's open architecture, so other people can add content widgets. They have to follow a few simple component rules, but otherwise you can add. Anyone can write Ajax that runs inside this start page. And so the idea is that I can take content and drag and drop it. So you get the drag and drop metaphor in Ajax. We're only looking at JavaScript code, manipulating the DOM here, folks. So the to-do list here I've got, which might connect to my actual to-do list. They say they have an add flake here, so you can say, I want to add delicious bookmarks or a map. My favorite one, and I'm looking for it here, is they have a full-blown word processor built into this. But the idea is it's a roaming desktop. You don't ever need to log in. You actually can log into it to access your private information. But the idea is that you don't have to keep your computer or laptop with you. It understands all your RSS feeds, all your mail, and everything like that. So it's a great example of Ajax being used truly as a platform. And you can bring in, it has chat Gmail integration, everything, all these little widgets that you put on here, and it behaves very much like a traditional application. So they have done a lot of the work here to do that. So you see a lot of the same metaphors you would in desktop software. So this is the example of some of the drag and drop things you can do to organize the views of your Ajax application so the users can customize it like they can never do with static web pages. So visual effects. There's a bunch of good ones listed here. They're pretty basic. What I want to get to is the periodic refresh. The browser refreshes volatile information by periodically polling the server. So that's a good way to make an Ajax application, just as it sits there, provide new value to the user, new and fresh content, right? And not by refreshing the page like a lot of news sites will refresh the front page every few minutes so you can see the headlines. My favorite example of this is Live Marks. It's a great situational awareness console in Ajax for the web. So what this application does, this Ajax application talks to the Delicious API. So Delicious is a very popular social bookmarking site for those who are not familiar with it. And what it does is on the right there, it shows you the popular bookmarks as they're being bookmarked. And each one of those is a link. You can click on it. And they have a JavaScript timer that pops periodically and goes and gets the latest bookmarks off of Delicious through their API, through their web services, and displays it here. I don't have to touch that web page again, but I'm getting continuously fresh content. And what it doesn't erase it. It actually, will create a web page that's 50 pages long if you let it run long enough. On the left there, that will refresh periodically. That's Delicious Popular for technical content. Anyways, it's a very simple Ajax application. If you look at the code, you'll laugh. But it's neat as far as showing what you can do with the timers to make the application interactive by virtue of itself. And I won't go through the rest of them. There's good things. Timeouts and heartbeats are good, especially if you have applications where users log in. You may lose your connection to the server. You need to have user timers to do the keep alives and things like that. The good frameworks, again, will do that for you automatically. And then we have diagnostic and testing patterns. And there's working examples on ajaxpatterns.org for all of these, with lots of code. Between this and the Yahoo user interface library, it's a great place to start to really get your Ajax legs. So we'll finish up with kind of recommendations. What should you do now that you've been kind of got this whole tour of what the frameworks and design patterns are? These are the big decision points. So when we sit down with people and say, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to create rich user experiences. I'm going to take my static web pages and completely revolutionize the way that I present my content and services to my users. First thing you need to understand is how complex is your use of Ajax going to be? Are you going to do full-blown Office productivity suite, or you just want to have some Ajax sizzle? You want to have some animation, a little bit of morphing? Those are completely different products, as we talked about. You might be looking at Prototype and Scriptaculous, or even if it's very simple DOM manipulation, you can make that cross-browser with just small bits of code. You don't even need a library or framework, and it's worth knowing how that stuff works. Next thing is maintenance. Because we don't really know where the Ajax market's going to go, who are going to have the dominant frameworks, and what's going to happen there. Understanding who's going to be maintaining your application in the long term. It's usually different folks that create an application versus those that maintain it. So just kind of being aware of this is the 20,000 lines of machine language like JavaScript that then some maintenance programmer has to take over. It doesn't happen, or at least it's very difficult. Time to market. If you want to get something out there and you want it to scale fairly well, Ruby on Rails is the fastest way to get a complete working application to market, even if you have to learn it. Even spending all the time that you need, all the time you want, learning Ruby on Rails and then developing the application is still twice as fast as doing it with the skills you have today. I mean, it really is amazing. There's a lot of issues there as far as having maintainability. Finding Ruby on Rails programmers isn't that easy. Open or closed. This is the GWT, the Google Web Toolkit. That again, very fast time to market, but it's not very extensible, not very open. You kind of have to live in the Google world, but you get a lot of benefits, including really great server-side debugging as well. And then carefully gauging your learning curve, really understanding how long it's going to take for you to develop good user experiences, because you're going to need, your web designer may not have the language and the mental framework to understand what Ajax is possible of, because virtually anything you can conceive of can be implemented in Ajax. And so really gauging what all of your folks are going to have to learn, from testing to preserving all the browser things that we talked about losing before. All that takes time and requires a learning curve. And then what your existing skills are. And that kind of brings us to the end of our talk today. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll take a few questions before we finish up. Any questions out there? All right. Well, yes, sir.
You mentioned a lot of the toolkits that work with Eclipse. Are you aware of any that work better with NetBeans or the others that you mentioned? I know that Google Web Toolkit also works with NetBeans.
I don't offhand. I just know that some do. So I want to say Backbase has good non-Eclipse support. They're one of the older Ajax frameworks. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.